The biggest highlight on Luka's team, beyond these amazing achievements, Knoxville Regional Top 32, Seniors Champion in Fort Wayne 2 years in a row with that back-to-back, bringing with these team this King Gambit, which was our big highlight. Yeah, also surrounded by a lot of great other partner Pokemon with the Amoonguss, Iron Bundle, Arcanine, Fluttermane, and Dragonite. Lots of offensive power here. Justin on the other side, no stranger to this level of competition. Top 8 at the Knoxville Regional Championships just a couple of weeks ago. Worlds Day 2 in 2017. 2017 Madison Regional Top 8, and also in 2016 Worlds Top 8. And that first Pokemon in that team is truly the reason why that Great Tusk, plus the Gothitelle, Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, the Tyranitar, and that Talonflame. Here we go, though, our leads, Talonflame and Fluttermane on Justin's side, King Gambit and Dragonite on Luka's side.
A very offensive lead for both players, especially knowing that, again, Luka is carrying that Black Glasses Terra Dark King Gambit. The solo Dark-type attacks, like there's no Iron Head, just to refresh everyone's memory, but not a big deal here as any kind of Dark-type attack. I think we saw a Terra Dark Kowtow Cleave just one-hit KO a Talonflame in Luka's earlier game today.
Yeah, I mean, you're facing off in front of this strong Fluttermane too, right? This Dragonite has the Assault Vest. It's probably in its best position right now, but even still, probably doesn't want to Terrastalize to take away that damage right now. We've seen Luka handle using a Terrastalization as at the latest possible second really well. King Gambit just going to protect this turn. A Will-O-Wisp not going to be its friend. Looks like it targeted down into what was that Dragonite, hitting the Amoonguss here, which is still a really nice target to have, something that can just consistently do damage to a Pokemon that, even though it can regenerate, can be pretty tough to deal with. Moonblast targeting down into the King Gambit does not go through.
It does not go through, and that's actually pretty good for Luka. Now that, oh, well, just kidding, the Talonflame is safety goggles. Okay, so the Will-O-Wisp going into Dragonite, I think that's a pretty fair call, knowing that Luka really does not want to let that King Gambit get burned right off the bat. Talonflame switching in, you would think gives it a little bit more security, except the Talonflame is holding that safety goggles item, so a Will-O-Wisp into King Gambit is still an option here. The saving grace is that the Fluttermane locked itself into Moonblast and not Dazzling Gleam. So if you do Rage Powder, you won't take a Moonblast. You might get burned still, which would be unfortunate, but you're at least protecting the King Gambit from damage this turn.
Fluttermane, though, is going to switch out. It doesn't like that move choice it's locked into here. Instead, going to be bringing out that Tyranitar, going to set up that Sand Stream. It will break the Gale Wings on its own Talonflame if Talonflame does not take any damage this turn. And that taunt into the Amoonguss is a really classic reason of why it would not be taking damage. Those taunts just absolutely huge. Kowtow Cleave, though, from the King Gambit into the Tyranitar does not have very effective damage, but still does a nice chunk. Looks like Luka was prepared for that taunt, though. Goes for a Pollen Puff into the King Gambit, who actually had not taken any damage just yet.
I think that's a smart play. You know, you prevent the taunt stopping you from being productive that turn, and if the Fluttermane stays in there, you get probably a big chunk of that that Moonblast damage off. Choice Specs Moonblast probably would do pretty sizable chunk to a non-Assault Vest King Gambit, especially one that's probably trained to be very offensive. Tyranitar actually a very good switch here because, especially considering that taunt, it will not get put to sleep by a Spore. Tyranitar and King Gambit kind of have a back and forth matchup a lot of the time, but in this case, since the King Gambit only has Dark-type attacks, and Tyranitar has Low Kick, very, very favorable for this Tyranitar.
Looks like Iron Bundle switching in here for that Amoonguss, though. A Pokemon that would love to possibly get some strong attacks out fast, but it's switching in here without a free switch, so it could get hit at any point. However, King Gambit's going to be protecting that, wants to stay safe. This Iron Bundle, it did get its booster energy as well, but Talonflame's Tailwind is going to help keep up the speed on Justin's side of the field. Rock Slide from the Tyranitar does not go into the King Gambit. You really want this to connect here onto the Iron Bundle, and it does, and that does so much damage.
That is a huge chunk of damage, and the Tailwind going up means that the Talonflame will be faster than Iron Bundle on this next turn, even with that booster energy. So something like a Brave Bird would easily be able to knock out the Iron Bundle. You threaten a Low Kick onto the King Gambit with Tyranitar. You threaten some kind of offensive switch as well, predicting something from Luka, but this is a very, very strong position for Justin to be in. That Gale Wing still intact means that even if the Tailwind didn't go up, the Brave Bird would be a priority move. Thanks to those safety goggles protecting it from that sand damage. There's not a whole lot that Luka threatens right now just because the Iron Bundle is being put under pressure by that Talonflame. You essentially just pin it down with a Brave Bird and let the Tyranitar slot do what it wants.
Yeah, I mean, Talonflame not taking any damage from those rocks is actually really nice right now. You still have priority Brave Bird, even if you weren't able, like you said, to get the Tailwind off if you went for something like another taunt. King Gambit here definitely not wanting to be the victim of something like another Rock Slide. Amoonguss going to switch in, is at least going to possibly be able to Pollen Puff. this Iron Bundle on the next turn as it protects this turn to prevent it from taking any more damage. Talonflame's Brave Bird into the Iron Bundle does have that priority thanks to the Gale Wings. Is not going to happen this turn. Gale Wings preserved once again.
Okay.
Heavy Slam though from the Tyranitar. This is one of the changes that they've made on this team with this Tyranitar, doing a good chunk of damage onto that Amoonguss. Iron Bundle consistently getting whittled down here.
Yeah, that's actually a really nice Heavy Slam. That's a big chunk of damage on Amoonguss. You still preserve something like the Gale Wings because you did not get the Brave Bird off with the recoil. And if you were possibly predicting something like a Flutter Mane switch to catch a low kick, that Heavy Slam would have very, very easily knocked it out. So that's a really smart play. I think the worlds in which Luka leaves the King Gambit on the field unprotected that turn are very few. And so predicting a switch like that, it's medium risk, I would say, high reward, because on the off chance the King Gambit stays in, maybe you lose the Talonflame, but even then, like, I think that's a pretty low risk play and a very smart one as well.
Yeah, I mean, even if the Dragonite came in exactly, right? It could have
done,
Dragonite,
Dragonite,
right.
Yep.
But either way, right, had that come in. Brave Bird, though, moving in first, enough to knock out the Amoonguss, not able to help its partner Pokemon out, not even worrying about going for a taunt when you know that you're doing so much damage with a Brave Bird right out of the gate. Lots of recoil taken right now. Hydro Pump looks like it's going to miss this turn on the Talonflame as well. Going to be huge and take this Rock Slide for the knockout. Justin Carris had a very productive turn for himself. Luka also really now has just those two strong Pokemon to try and fight back.
And there's one final turn of Tailwind for this Tyranitar to outspeed the Dragonite. And luckily for the Tyranitar, I believe that is a multi-scale Dragonite, except the Talonflame is still around. Can possibly try and go for a Brave Bird to break that multi-scale. You do not have the option to protect, and so something like a Brave Bird Rock Slide could do a lot of damage to this Dragonite. The King Gambit might have something to say about that. If you do leave it alone, it might start taking some KOs of its own. With a Kowtow claim into Talonflame, a Sucker Punch might even be close, especially if you do Terrastalize it. But either way, this Tyranitar in a very solid spot here.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably not going to want to Terrastalize that Dragonite because it's a flying type, and you don't really want to put yourself in front of...
That won't save you.
Exactly. That's of all the things that could help you, I don't think it's the right one. Looks like that Terrastalization, though, is going to be coming out at least to try and give them a bit of a hand, that Tyranitar with that flying Terra type. Really nice to take a low kick in that particular defensive position here in case you need to. You know, I think there's a lot to be said about the amount of damage that you save with that type of Terrastalization. A Protect on the King Gambit, though. Will-O-Wisp from the Talonflame connecting as well into that Dragonite. If it does not break the multi-scale by the end of this turn, possibly something could from this Tyranitar as well. Low kick was the target, though, into that King Gambit. So now multi-scale will be broken thanks to the burn, and this Dragonite with its own low kick not able to do a whole lot of damage thanks to that Terrastalization.
Yeah, it doesn't do much damage at all. Possibly Ice Spinner range, but that burn's going to help you out a lot to mitigate a lot of that physical damage. Like, worst case scenario there, I guess you miss the Will-O-Wisp and the multi-scale is still intact, as Sand does end that turn, which is actually pretty convenient for Luka there. But I guess you could see, Luka knows this is pretty dire, especially considering that Justin still has two very healthy Pokemon in the back. This is going to be a very rough comeback because the Talonflame can very easily just set up Tailwind again. A burned Dragonite will not be able to knock it out with an extreme speed from this range. And so this is a pretty solid win for Justin Carris, a very comprehensive one.
Justin was able to keep his last Pokemon hidden, which is pretty nice. Talonflame, Fluttermane, though, the lead here from Justin Carris in Game 2. Fluttermane and Arcanine, the lead from Luka. However, you're only getting this Intimidate down onto the Talonflame, who probably has some other ideas in turn 1.
Yeah, I mean, the Arcanine coming here, that's probably the two things you don't really want to see, especially considering there's no Snarl on this Arcanine. You drop the damage on Brave Bird, but I think on Talonflame on this team is not super focused on getting damage out. It's more of the supportive type with the Taunt, Tailwind, and Will-O-Wisp. The Fluttermane on Justin's end looking pretty solid, especially because with that Tailwind you can guarantee that yours will be attacking first, and you won't have to worry about any possible, difference in training that might make Luka's a little bit faster or a possible speed tie later on.
Yeah, I mean, there's no extreme speed on the Arcanine either,
right,
which is
that
really
close combat.
Huge because of Talonflame being able to, if it doesn't take the extreme speed, then it's able to get Tailwind up for free. Fluttermane switching out here for Luka as well, bringing in this King Gambit, a move that I definitely see making a lot of sense here. Tailwind from the the Talonflame. If something is going to be taking something like a Moonblast, you might as well send in a Pokemon that can at least take some neutral damage, but Shadow Ball instead into the Arcanine, clearly seeing that as the big threat here. It takes a ton of damage, and this Flare Blitz firing back into the Flutter Mane. This might knock itself out on recoil. It's going to be real close. It gets the burn, which is going to help take some damage down every single turn. Not enough to get knocked out by the recoil. It does bring it down to, I believe, 23 HP, and this Flutter Mane almost down into the red as well. That's
a big bit of damage down the Flutter Mane. That is very easily Sucker Punch range, especially considering that the Flutter Mane on Justin's end is Terra Steel and not Terra Fairy. So you cannot Terrestrialize into a Dark Resistance, for example, and maybe stomach a Sucker Punch, fire off one more attack. But at the same time, that is a lot of damage on what is an important Pokemon that we were just talking about maybe being the difference between a win and a loss for Luka in the second game. And so I think that's a very, very fair trade if you're Justin. You expect that damage from Flutter Blitz anyway, and that might be like one of the big reasons you could win this game.
One thing that's really interesting about Luka's play, right? He just gets the Sucker Punch knockout onto the Flutter Mane here. Talonflame's Will-O-Wisp targeting down into the King Gambit. Not exactly something you want to see either if you're the King Gambit, but you at least were able to get a big knockout onto a Pokemon that can cause you a lot of problems. Arcanine clicking Close Combat. This Close Combat actually targeted down into where that Flutter Mane was in case of a switch in, which is a play I really, really like. You're already at low HP. Taking those defense and special defense drops, probably not too bothersome.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best switch-ins there would have been the Tyranitar, and considering that the Flutter Mane is Choice Specs, if the Flutter Mane stays on the field, it will be knocked out by Sucker Punch with this play, and there's no chance that anything like a Close Combat would ever be whiffed into a Flutter Mane. This Great Tusk, however, not what you want to see if you are Luka, especially considering I think we saw the Dragonite is not here. There's no ground immunity, and like we saw in Justin's game earlier, the Great Tusk, well, I don't think it was someone else using this team, but the Talonflame Great Tusk adjustment when there's not a whole lot of ground resist available is a massive, massive advantage, especially when you can just start firing off some very strong attacks.
And Great Tusk might have been that fourth Pokemon in the back in game one, too.
Right.
It may not have even been that Gothitelle. Great Tusk kind of just one of those Pokemon that if you get rid of the flying type Pokemon, you can kind of just send in Great Tusk. It's got a Focus Sash. You've got at least one solid turn, usually getting that damage off. If Luka didn't bring the Iron Bundle either, which I don't remember, I missed it, but then you don't have a way to slow it down. But Great Tusk just going to protect this turn, would stop something like a Sucker Punch as well. Instead, Arcanine also protecting. It's at such low HP, but if you can hang on, maybe get some big damage or an Intimidate later could be nice. Taunt down onto that King Gambit as well. Not going to be able to go for some different moves, but Kowtow Cleave definitely at least works here. Never going to miss. Will do some good damage, but that burn really showing how frustrating it is to not have your full damage output.
Interesting, like Taunt and the King Gambit there. I think what Justin may have been trying to do is cover a possible Amoonguss switch. That way, if the Amoonguss comes in on the Great Tusk, you don't want it to be able to Spore regardless of what happens on the next turn. And so the Talonflame able to, taunt that slot. Also prevents and protects this coming turn, which is nice, especially given the Arcanine protected. There's probably not a protect coming out from either slot. So if you do want to go for a big Earthquake this turn, you have the option to, with essentially guaranteed damage into either of those slots. So a taunt that you might not have expected to see coming, but it actually has a lot of really practical play here.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, too, to not have the opportunity to get a taunt onto something like the Amoonguss, but Luka has been able to keep that last Pokemon safe, which is truly, I think, the biggest boon for Luka so far. But both of these trainers have one Pokemon they haven't revealed. For Justin, I wouldn't be surprised if it's that Tyranitar. I could see that coming out. Sucker Punch, though, looks like it fails this turn. Going to be a different type of move. Will-O-Wisp hits into the Arcanine, assuming a switch out here. Great Tusk clicking Earthquake is not going to hit its partner Pokemon Talonflame, but should, I think, knock out both of these Pokemon. Actually, King Gambit not knocked out here. Really interesting, especially with that burn. It's going to take a little bit of burn chip, but it was not able to have any offensive alpha. Clearly, that Sucker Punch targeting down into the Talonflame.
Yeah, I really like that Will-O-Wisp again. Like, there's not a whole lot that Talonflame needs to be doing that turn offensively. And if you think the Dragonite might be in the back, that's the one thing that could switch in on an Earthquake and not take any damage. You very easily, mitigate, or you take advantage of that with a possible burn on the swap. Importantly there, the Sucker Punch also means that Talonflame sticks around this turn and has the opportunity to threaten another Tailwind. Clearly the Gullwings is broken, the Talonflame is not at full HP, and the Iron Bundle is faster than it. A Freeze Dry, these Talonflames tend to be trained pretty bulky, so a Freeze Dry might not knock it out from here. A Hydro Pump certainly would, but you have to risk that 30%, not 30, 20% mischance. Great Tusk is threatened a lot by Iron Bundle here. Even if Tailwind does go back up, the Iron Bundle will always outspeed Great Tusk and Tailwind. That is the one main downfall of using Great Tusk. It is just not quite fast enough to be faster than a Booster Energy Iron Bundle.
I think the one thing that's tough, right, is you have a really free Freeze Dry into this Great Tusk slot. That could have been a Tyranitar, but you get the knockout either way. That was a lifeline for Tyranitar, so it's not like you needed 2 hits. It was not a focus sash either. Talonflame does get the Tailwind up, but you've still got a speedy Pokemon with the ability to use Icy Wind and a priority move in Sucker Punch. Not going to happen this turn, though. Kowtow Cleave with a critical hit. I don't know if that mattered because of that burn damage, and it was really close in that last turn. Able to get the knockout. You are now succumbing to that burn damage this turn, but your Flutter Mane can come in for free. It is now 2 Pokemon against whatever Justin has been hiding in secret in the back.
The damage from the critical hit might not have mattered, but I think if you're Justin, you prefer the Talonflame going down anyway. You really want this extra switch into the Flutter Mane here, especially because Tailwind did just go up. We know there's no Focus Sash on either of these Pokemon. The Flutter Mane on Luka's side is not holding a Focus Sash because it is the Choice Specs variant. We've seen the Booster Energy, and so... Oh wait, the Flutter Mane got knocked out. Why am I thinking there's a Flutter Mane on just inside the field right now?
Don't even worry about it.
Oh my goodness.
Don't even worry about it.
This is actually very good for Luka instead. I changed my mind.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that's really interesting here, right? Luka going to Terrasilize into the Ice typing. You get rid of your Water typing. You make Freeze Dry not a fully effective move here, I believe, unless that's... It's hard to tell when you have 2. Actually, sorry, that was Justin's, but the Freeze Dry here, targeting down. You have the ×2 stab boost into this Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. Really not doing a whole lot of damage. No Freeze, though. Freeze Dry targeting down into the Iron Bundle. You cannot freeze an Ice type, so Luka is not going to get that same exact kind of freeze luck that he is hoping for, and the Moonblast just going to finish that up here. Luka has brought it to a Game 3, our first Game 3 of this top 8 cut.
Okay, so I completely got turned around there. The turn that the Freeze Dry went into the Great Tusk, I think that what Justin was trying to do there by not protecting the Great Tusk was call the Freeze Dry or Hydro Pump into the Talonflame slot and possibly get some damage off and knock out that Iron Bundle instead.
Looking like Game 3 here for these trainers. Talonflame, Great Tusk, Flutter Mane, and Arcanine. We've seen these leads a good number of times, but still terrifying to give this Great Tusk access to a fast Earthquake early.
Yeah, a fast Earthquake or a fast Headlong Rush. I think a Tailwind would allow it to speed either of the Pokemon on Luka's side of the field. A Terra Ground Headlong Rush, even at -1, maybe enough to clear out a Flutter Mane, would very obviously clear out the Arcanine with that weakness, but a Terrestrialization from the Arcanine is also a possibility if that is something that Luka thinks he wants to preserve. He did have the Arcanine get knocked out pretty quickly in Game 2, even after we said that was a pretty big component of the match. And it did end up being, you dropped the damage from the Talonflame there. So it did have a presence on the field, especially getting a bunch of damage onto that Flutter Mane. But the Arcanine now, knowing Great Tusk is immediately on the field, you have to worry about maybe preserving that Intimidate for later.
Yeah, I could see a really easy protect from this Arcanine, which is what we're seeing from the Great Tusk at this moment. Probably the turn to kind of bait out a couple of these protects and get some big damage next turn. Allow for a safer setup. Looks like this Talonflame's Tailwind is going to go out unpunished. No Gale Wings punishment either, because this Flutter Mane went for a Moonblast into the Great Tusk instead. So no damage on Luka's side of the field. And now Justin has a really comfy Headlong Rush or Earthquake into that Arcanine.
He does, but if you do that, you have to risk getting knocked out by a Moonblast. I think even if you Terrasilize and you Headlong Rush, a Choice Specs Moonblast into a -1 defense Great Tusk might be enough to just one-hit KO it. Obviously, if you don't Terrasilize, you are going to be weak to that Fairy move. But the Tailwind means that the Arcanine and the Flutter Mane will both be outsped by this Great Tusk. Still threatening a lot of damage, even at -1, because it is such a strong Pokemon. It is holding that Life Orb, and especially if it has the potential to Terrasilize into that ground typing.
Flutter Mane not wanting to stick around here, though, does want to switch out, bring in the King Gambit. Once again, you're bringing a Pokemon with this priority in Sucker Punch, which can be really helpful at times, but at the moment, it's a Steel type. And that's where some of the problems begin here. Great Tusk, Terrasilizing into a ground-type Pokemon, is going to have 2 times of its attack in any of those ground-type moves, especially Taunt from the Talonflame into the Arcanine.
This could be pretty bad.
This could be a huge Earthquake here. Looks like from this Great Tusk, Headlong Rush is the move. It should be able to knock out, I think, either one of these Pokemon. King Gambit, one-hit knockout, easy peasy. You take the defense and the special defense drops, but you've now gotten rid of a pretty key player here. Pretty much unpunished if this Arcanine is able to not get anything off on this turn. Went for a Flare Blitz, though, into this Great Tusk. Does do a good chunk of damage, though, but this Tailwind's still helpful.
Tailwind very helpful there. I really, really like that taunt just because you make sure that the Arcanine doesn't Will-O-Wisp you. The Terra Ground Headlong Rush obviously would have knocked out the Flutter... I wouldn't say obviously. It most likely would have knocked out that Flutter Mane just because the Great Tusk is so strong. That Headlong Rush is a very, very strong move. And by doing that, you know that there's no Protect coming to that slot. You know that there's probably no Dragonite. We did not see Dragonite in Game 2, which is a game that Luka won. And so there's not really a big risk in using Headlong Rush into that slot. And so you get a lot of big damage off there. You make sure that you prevent the burn from the Will-O-Wisp. The Flare Blitz does go off. It's meaningful damage, except the Freeze Dry would have just knocked you out anyway, so that damage difference might not be a huge deal.
Brave Bird this turn, moving first into the Iron Bundle, just beginning to get some damage down. Icy Wind going to try to slow down stuff here. Great Tusk knocked out thanks to having that minus a stage in its special defense. Talonflame losing a stage of its speed as well, no longer having any sort of Gale Wings boost either. This Arcanine's taunted, so this Flare Blitz is going to be its damaging move of choice into that Talonflame, bringing it down much lower. Luka definitely still trying to keep that momentum. You may have lost the King Gambit, but you got rid of Justin's terrestrialized Pokemon before it could do as much as I think Justin wanted.
Yeah, I mean, you did get a big chunk of damage to the King Gambit there, and the King Gambit is pretty annoying with those sucker punches, especially considering your Pokemon are getting a little bit low themselves. Now the Iron Bundle comes in here, it will still have at least one turn of guaranteed speed priority over the Iron Bundle on Luka's side thanks to the Tailwind. However, I believe this is the last turn of Tailwind, so you want to take as much advantage of that as you can. The Iron Bundle Freeze Dry, usually 2 KOs opposing Iron Bundle. We saw the Terra Ice Freeze Dry do very, very little damage into the Flutter Mane that Luka does have in the back. And obviously the Terrestrialization is no longer an option anyway, but the damage options Justin has starting to get a little bit lower because that Great Tusk is gone. It's going to come down to what the 4th Pokemon is in the back.
Justin has to make the call here on if this Arcanine terrestrializes, which we can see that it's going to. Right. It terrestrializes it to a water type. If Justin made the call and goes for a Freeze Dry into this Arcanine, should be enough to get the knockout. This Arcanine is taunted. It cannot protect.
Correct.
It cannot go for a defensive move. It has to go for something like a Flare Blitz this turn. Iron Bundle protecting, really smart now, because at least you may still be faster at the end of this turn. You've got the booster energy. Icy Wind is not going to slow you down either. Now that you've baited out this terrestrialization from Luka, you can maybe get a little bit farther down. Talonflame able to hang on here. It does have some reduced speed by another stage, but Brave Bird's going to knock it out here with doing a little bit of extra damage onto that Iron Bundle, bring it down to under half of its HP.
Well, the nice thing about Talonflame going down there is that, again, the Talonflame being knocked out is not often a bad thing. Or not often, yeah, it's often not a bad thing.
Correct.
There we go. Because a lot of the time, Talonflame, once it does its job, once it gets Tailwind up, which did actually just peter out like we just saw, once it taunts something, once it burns something, a lot of the time it doesn't have the greatest offensive output in the format. Luckily now, the Tyranitar comes in, which will stand up decently well to this Iron Bundle. It might have a bit of an issue with the Flutter Mane in the back because it can no longer terrestrialize, and those choice specs Moonblast will be doing a lot of damage, even in the sand with that Assault Vest. Arcanine terrestrializing there means that Freeze Dry will be super effective. The Iron Bundle protecting means that there was no mind game there, trying to call either a Freeze Dry or a Hydro Pump. And how these speeds work out is going to be really big here, because if the Iron Bundle on Justin's end is faster than the Iron Bundle on Luka's end, it can possibly knock it out with a Freeze Dry before the Icy Wind comes through, but it's not going to happen.
On Luka's side, going first, dropping the speed on both of Justin's Pokemon here. If you match an Icy Wind with an Icy Wind, no, a Freeze Dry instead into that Arcanine. It's enough for the knockout. So you're able to get this huge Pokemon in Arcanine off of the field. You have not taken a ton of damage onto your Tyranitar. Tyranitar still free to go for its attack here. Heavy Slam! That great Steel-type move into the Iron Bundle, enough for the knockout. This is the Flutter Mane in the back for Luka. You have a very speedy Iron Bundle, and you have a Tyranitar that cannot terrestrialize.
It can't terrestrialize, but I think with the Assault Vest in the sand might be able to let it stomach one Moonblast from this very strong Flutter Mane. Oh, it's going to be so close.
It's going to be
More importantly, that Heavy Slam means that if the Tyranitar survives this turn, it will be able to fire off a Heavy Slam that will very certainly KO this Flutter Mane. It's going to be so close, because this Flutter Mane probably does not get knocked out by 2 Freeze Dries.
Hydro Pump
Maybe a Hydro Pump and Freeze Dry does it, though.
Brings it down to half of its HP. Moonblast firing back. You need a big critical hit. Does not happen.
Not even
super effective damage, but Heavy Slam also super effective. That is going to send Justin Carris to your finals of the Charlotte Regional Championships.
So well played.
Luka Trejgut, who has played phenomenally